How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
My fellow Americans, welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. Across America, the phone number 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, yes, we got to start with the great debate last night. Highlights. We essentially had two New Deal Democrats on stage, one pro-life, one pro-choice, arguing over the expansion of government and who gets to control it. But besides that, my gosh, J.D. Vance mopped the floor with Tim Walz. Last night was the best debate performance of any candidate running for the presidency or vice presidency, at least in a generation. J.D. Vance gave a remarkable performance, and I got to just say, as a side note to him, I appreciate he did not wear a crimson red tie. I actually liked the fact that he was not in a standard red tie. It was a little more purplish than red. You ladies will know the color better than me, but it wasn't one of those bright red typical ties with Tim Walz going the prototypical blue tie, blue suit sort of thing. I appreciated that, and he was a fantastic debater. So much so that the Democrats had to pivot after the debate immediately to, well, the vice presidential debates don't matter. And by the way, they're right on that. This debate is not going to move the needle one way or the other. But it was a compelling performance, and what it did is it made J.D. Vance the front runner for the Republican nomination if Trump loses. He was command of the facts and articulate. Whether I liked some of what he had to say or not, he did a fantastic job. And his opponents were, shrill, terrible schoolmarms. And then Tim Walz was a terrible debate moderator. CBS News discredited itself. I thought David Muir had a stick up his butt during that debate. What a smug, self-pretentious tool. But these two ladies last night, now, you got to be careful because you can say that stuff about David Muir and no one cares, but you say the same thing about them. Oh, you're sexist. You're sexist. No, they were horrible awfuls, affluent white female urban liberals, and that's what they catered the debate to. We learned more about their political bubble than we learned about the candidates based on the questions they asked. Iran literally launched over 200 missiles yesterday at Israel, and they did not ask a single question about it. J.D. Vance has been pretty firm in his opposition to continued funding of Ukraine. They didn't ask a single question about it. You know what they asked about? Climate change. They asked about abortion. Of course, they asked the January 6th question. But nope, the current breaking news, God forbid they ask relevant questions about current headlines. Nope. And then they promised they wouldn't fact check. And every time they ended, they had to have the last word. Listen, there is a negative stereotype of a certain woman, some call Karen, who has to have the last word. And these two women played to that stereotype. At the end, they wanted to fact check and editorialize, and they did it to both candidates. In fairness, they did it to both candidates. They just smug. Actually, scientists say, actually, this is the consensus. We don't want to hear from you. Shut up. Ask the question. And I would apply that criticism to men or women, but you applied to them. They're like, oh, you're sexist for saying that. How dare you say that to me? No, you were a horrible moderator, Margaret Brennan. You are a horrible moderator, Norah O'Donnell. I really do want this in the record. Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan, what you have processed as sexism today because people didn't like your moderating last night is your defensive mechanism to avoid grappling with the fact that you actually sucked as debate moderators. You were terrible debate moderators. You were preening. You were rude. We have so many questions and not enough time. We have to move on. We have to move on. But let me get the final word to editorialize and fact check in a way I promised I wouldn't do. It was rude and unprofessional. can we not have national reporters do these debates anymore? Can you find somebody at a TV station in Atlanta, Georgia, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and put them in a room together, two swing states, and say, local guys, y'all aren't arrogant D-bags. Y'all do the questions. Y'all actually have the debate, because these preening, pretentious, prattling idiots in Washington, D.C. and New York are too high on their own supply to do a decent debate anymore. They actually mistake their pretty faces on television for authority and expertise. They're just vapid dimwits. They're like Kamala Harris. It was ridiculous, and J.D. Vance held his own against all of it. That sort of fact-checking cut the microphone nonsense when he's having to explain to them immigration.
It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
I'm sorry, just to clarify for our audience, I got a fact check, which you promised you wouldn't do, but you just couldn't help it, because you have confused your pretty face for a voice of authority when really you don't know much of anything, which J.D. Vance then had to point out to you as you tried to cut him off because you just had to be right, even though you were wrong.
Senator, we have so much to get to.
Margaret,
we have so much to get to.
We're going to turn now to the economy. Thank you.
Margaret, the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check. And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own
Thank you, Senator, for
leadership.
describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
We have so much to get to.
Since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we
CBP
want to have
One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut.
Because Margaret Brennan got it wrong and didn't like being corrected by the man. How sexist of him to point out to her that she was wrong. J.D. Vance ate these people alive and spit them out. It was actually kind of remarkable, including, I gotta give it to him, this part.
Pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to.
We have a lot to get to. Again, we have a lot to get to. We have so little time and so much to get. They were horrible debate moderators. But Vance, like, Tim, poor guy, you got to play whack-a-mole with all of this stuff. It was great. He kept coming back time and time again, making it about Kamala Harris being there right now, constantly. In fact, it drove Nicole Wallace at MSNBC insane. Had a funny moment there. It was so funny. They just couldn't help themselves. J.D. Vance continually ran circles around them. And then Tim Walz, every time he opened his mouth, he just said something, he literally said this.
Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety.
I've become friends with school shooters. Tim Walz said that on stage. He also was completely ill-prepared for the question about Tiananmen. Turns out he lied. He wasn't there. They asked him in the most softball way possible and gave him a large pass without too much probing, and he still flubbed it.
We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, You said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms.
Okay, pause. Stop that. We got to go back. Hang on a second. Hang on. Roll the tape back. Let's get to Tim Walz. Listen to this again.
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400,
I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400.
Rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I
rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights came on.
That service,
and I'm proud of that. What the hell sort of service? I rode the street bike till the lights came on, and I'm proud of that service. What service were you offering by riding your street bike in small town Nebraska, Tim? Clearly nervous.
National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota
You'll be unsurprised to note he's avoiding answering the question.
So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this.
Kudos for Margaret Brennan jumping in here in just this moment to reiterate the actual question.
Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community, and then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just...
No, you did not. You said you were there, and we know that you were not there. You have now lied about your military service. You've lied about being in Tiananmen. And last night you said that your son was the witness to a shooting at a community center. I'd like to presume you're not lying about that, but I think I need some verification, sir, before I can actually go along with it. You want to know how ultimately this debate played out? This is an undecided voter in the state of Georgia.
We had a great economy with the person that I voted for,
who says there's very little the Harris campaign could do to scoop away his or his mother Sharon's vote for the man they've supported since 2016.
So he was like, I think I'm going to vote for Donald Trump, and you were like, honey, me too, and then you guys brought it in for a hug?
Honey, me too. This is my mom.
Yeah, way done. And it wasn't an undecided voter. They've been Trump supporters since 2016. Yeah, well done there, CBS, with your undecided voter focus group. A few people have been voting for Trump since 2016, and the mother calling the son honey. That's how well it went for CBS News and for Tim Walz. J.D. Vance mopped the floor with all of them. That is, we got more audio to play when we come back, and also some very candid thoughts some of you won't like. Welcome back. It is Eric Erickson here. I want to say something, and I'm going to be as plain speaking as I possibly can. The last Republican presidential candidate I supported in our primary was George W. Bush in 2000 who won. I vehemently opposed John McCain. When George W. Bush was president, I started criticizing him pretty regularly for his expansion of government with No Child Left Behind, Medicare Part D, so much so that as the editor-in-chief at Red State, the White House set up an account to regularly respond to me. I did the very first podcast interview Rush Limbaugh ever did. I had Rush on, and we had a conversation and got him to say that George W. Bush was a good Republican and fine president, but was not a conservative. Opposed Mitt Romney because he wasn't a conservative, and same with Donald Trump. The difference is that the McCain team, the Romney team, the Bush team, they could all take the criticism and understand I'm still going to vote for him, even as I criticize him. The Trump fans are super sensitive that if you criticize him at all, you're expressing some sort of disloyalty. I can vote for the man, but I'll say this. What J.D. Vance did on stage last night was a commanding performance, but also a complete rejection of the values of the Republican Party over the last 40 years and a complete ditching of conservatism. And for guys who are concerned about the size and scope of government, you've got to be concerned that J.D. Vance came out in favor of expert industrial policy controls from Washington, came out with expansion of government benefits, came out with expansion of government mandates on businesses. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the big winner at last night's debate because we had two New Deal Democrats on stage, one who's pro-choice and the other pro-life but willing to abandon it on the national stage. That's ultimately at the policy side of it. Vance had a brilliant performance, but this was not conservatism. And I fear what Trump and Vance do if they win is they grow government, and then the Democrats will eventually win again, and they'll weaponize it against us as opposed to shrinking government. When you start imposing mandates on businesses and you start having experts set industrial policy, when the Democrats become in control, they're going to put their experts in charge of it, and you're not going to like it. Better to get rid of it than to try to control it temporarily unless you're going to have a coup and overthrow the country. And they say they're not going to do that, and I take them at their word. It was a massive, both guys wound up agreeing a lot on expanding government. As a conservative who's a conservative because I'm a Christian and I believe we're all sinners, I want as few in charge of me as possible. And Vance and Walz instead argued over how much more power to give those sinners and just who should control them. And I have concerns with that. Now, we'll move on. First, let me tell you about the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. You get 3 of them. You save $200. You get them for less than $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. They clean the air. They get rid of the dust. They get rid of the pollen. They get rid of the bacteria. They can even eliminate viruses with the new plasma ones. They're actually really cool. They also wipe out odors. They generate ozone. And in generating that ozone, the ozone locks onto the ions that cause smells and destroys those ions. So no smell can withstand it. Dirty diapers, pet odors, smoke odors, musty odors, the litter box, you name it. And you can get 3 of them, save $200. One upstairs, one downstairs, one in your basement, one in your travel bag. You can hold this thing in your hand. It's not big, and it just packs a wallop. You can even plug it up with a USB cord, like into my laptop. I've done that before. You go to EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERIC3, ERICK3. That's the discount code, no space, the number, ERICK, the number 3, no space, EdenPureDeals.com, discount code ERIC3. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number is 877-973-7425 should you wish to be on the program. I want to go back to this point. It makes people very, very, very sensitive. And I do struggle to understand why. My theory is that despite being able to grab hold of the Republican Party in 2016 and hold it ever since, there's still this underlying, I don't want to say inferiority complex because it's not really that. It's this sensitivity that maybe they're not in as much control as they think. They haven't rooted out everyone. But I could criticize Bush, Romney, McCain, McConnell, you name it, and was never told that I was disloyal or clearly a closet Democrat or things like that. That they never worried. They understood where the criticism came from. But you criticize the Trump-Vance ticket, and you're immediately labeled disloyal. Apparently, it's now rhino to want the Republicans to actually be Republicans. So when Vance last night and Walz agreed on so much expansion of government programs, on so much expansion of government services, on so much expansion of government welfare programs, on so much expansion of government mandates on businesses, driving up the cost and the size and scope of government, I was like, wait a second, as somebody who actually cares about reining in government, the size and scope of government, that I'm not hearing much that I like in this debate, even as I like Vance's performance. They're like, oh, I dare you, you've got to be voting for Kamala Harris. Like, no, I mean, it comes down to, like, she's still going to pick better judges, among other things. And, of course, Walz is totally discrediting himself on free speech and China and everything else. But can you not criticize your own side? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to. I'm absolutely going. I'm not going to stop. It's just kind of wild, the level of, like, I mean, the Bush, Romney, McCain people, they didn't care. They felt sure of themselves and their position. And I think that's why Trump and his supporters are so ruthless when it comes to any dissent, is that they're really not sure of themselves and their position within the party, that at any moment it could be snatched away from them. They're in charge. I've given him money. I intend to vote for him. But at the same time, I'm like, this is going to end badly for us. When you expand the size and scope of government the way J.D. Vance articulated last night, eventually the Democrats get back in charge and they weaponize it against us. And you're not going to be able to stop them unless you're going to get in office and then have a coup and overthrow the constitutional order, which we don't want to get into that. That was the one moment where J.D. Vance didn't handle himself well, I thought, on stage last night. But other than that, Vance just mopped the floor with Tim Walz, who his performance was so bad, Democrats skipped trying to defend him and just went to, well, it doesn't matter. This, again, another example.
She was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their health care decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the...
By the way, Tim Walz yet again lying. That is actually what the law in Minnesota does. When Scott Jennings pointed it out on CNN last night, the Democrats had an absolute meltdown over it. I mean, it was like sticking their fingers in their ears and going, la, 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 la. They didn't want to hear it. It's actually true. In Minnesota, Tim Walz signed a law, and the law specifically says if a child is born alive after surviving an abortion, you do not have to give that child health care. So the child is alive, and you can let the doctor let the child die. That's the law in Minnesota, and Tim Walz didn't want to grapple with it. Neither did the Democrats on CNN last night. Now, listen, pro-life activists are very upset with J.D. Vance last night, and he did make it pretty clear that he has changed his mind on national abortion laws and that he really is okay with the states deciding there really shouldn't be national laws. And he pulled his punches on, for example, the Amber Thurman story. And pro-lifers very upset with him. Well, let me defend J.D. Vance here. I've had my criticisms on the New Deal stuff, but on the life stuff, I'm very committed to pro-life. I would love a national law that bans abortion. I wish he and Trump would be able to defend it, but they're on defense on this issue. And my suspicion is the campaign asked him to pull his punches. He's actually very articulate on the issue. My suspicion is that the campaign asked him to pull his punches and not dwell on it, in large part because this is the one thing that the Republicans pull badly on, particularly with women. So why dig your heels in on this issue and try to defend it when you can just move on? So I'm not really that worked up about it. I have some pro-life friends who are. I'm like, no, I'm kind of worked up about the wanting expanded government programs and mandates on businesses and stuff. Now, whether we vote for him or not is relevant. I don't like those policy positions. But on the life stuff, I got to think they're looking at their polling. They're trying to convince swing voting females to vote for them, and abortion is not a good one. But on the issue of the Springfield, Ohio stuff, this came up in the debate last night, and I thought that Vance handled it well.
Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You've got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Yeah, I mean, listen, time and time again, Vance was able to weave this back better than Trump did on stage during his debate with Harris about Harris being in office right now.
We're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%, open the American southern border, and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now, not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans.
Yes, thank you, J.D. Vance. Time and time again, coming back to that. So much so, this is Abby Phillips after the debate was over. Within less than 10 minutes after the debate concludes, Abby Phillips on CNN, this with Tim Walz.
I mean, I think there was a clear lack of preparation and execution here on Walz's part.
I think actually it's the opposite. I think he had too much preparation.
Maybe, yeah.
He had so many lines that he was clearly trying to say that he didn't listen and said when J.D. Vance said one of the many, many things he really hit Kamala Harris on, not Tim Walz, but Kamala Harris, he didn't respond because he clearly had things in his mind. I think the lack of interviews that he has done with national media, with local media, it showed. He needed more reps.
Look, J.D. Vance, we knew going into this was a good debater. He went to Yale. He was polished. He was smooth. That Tim Walz, though, was as bad as he was is remarkable. If the Republicans lose in November, I know we'll go through the all it was stolen stuff, but if Republicans lose in November, they're going to have to ask themselves if for years they have said repeatedly that being Democrat light was not the way to be Democrats because you can't be the real thing. Maybe we need to go back to not being a lighter version of Democrats, but actually an alternative to Democrats. If the Democrats lose in November, there's going to be a lot of looking at Pennsylvania thinking, what if we had Josh Shapiro on that debate stage? What if we had Josh Shapiro? The reality is this. The vice presidential debate doesn't really matter. In a very tight election like this one was, maybe at the margins it does. But mostly it's not going to matter. Most Americans didn't watch it. By the time they got, reporters are actually attacking Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan, not for their terrible moderation last night, but that they put the January 6th question towards the end by the time most people had tuned out, because that one in several focus groups wound up hurting Trump and Vance. And several of the focus groups of independent voters, there were several in each who were like really hung up on Vance's performance on that answer. But it doesn't matter. Vice presidential debates never matter. You know how I know vice presidential debates don't matter? They don't matter because Dan Quayle did not prevent George H.W. Bush from becoming president of the United States. And that is, I realize, history lesson there for a lot of people. But in 1988, George H.W. Bush ran with Dan Quayle. And Quayle was a senator from Indiana. To this day, people aren't really sure why on earth he picked Dan Quayle to be his running mate, but he did. And in so doing, he got Dan Quayle on a debate stage with Lloyd Benson. Let me see if I can find this for you here, because this is worth hearing. Lloyd Benson. So this is a defining moment of the 1998 vice presidential debate. It's the only thing to this day anybody remembers about the vice presidential debate. It was such a brutal beatdown of Dan Quayle. It's the only thing to this day when people think of Dan Quayle, that and his inability to spell potato, which wasn't really his fault. It's about the only thing people remember, and it was not fatal to George H.W. Bush becoming president of the United States.
We'll have day-to-day activities with all the people in government. And then, if that unfortunate situation happens, if that situation, which would be very tragic, happens, I will be prepared to carry out the responsibilities of the presidency of the United States of America. And I will be prepared to do that. I will be prepared not only because of my service in the Congress, but because of my ability to communicate and to lead. It is not just age, it's accomplishments, it's experience. I have far more experience than many others that sought the office of Vice President of this country. I have as much experience in the Congress as Jack Kennedy did when he sought the presidency. I will be prepared to deal with the people in the Bush administration if that unfortunate event would ever occur.
Senator Benson.
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
That kind of was the end of Dan Quayle ever being able to advance in American politics beyond one term as vice president of the United States. But it was not fatal to George H.W. Bush becoming president. Tim Walz's performance on the debate stage is not fatal to Kamala Harris becoming president of the United States. Kamala Harris is fatal to Kamala Harris becoming president of the United States. Old Glory Bank is my bank, and I would love for you guys to consider using Old Glory Bank as your bank. It's a fantastic bank. It's an online bank. They're not going to have a branch near you, but it's okay. They figured out how to make it very easy for you to deposit cash if you need to. You can use the mobile app to be able to deposit checks. You can get loans. You can get mortgages. You can, even though they're an online bank, you can establish a relationship with them, a working relationship, and build up a relationship with your banker at Old Glory Bank for loans and mortgages and questions. They have great tools online. They have great online bill pay features. And you're never going to get your bank canceled because you're conservative, because these are conservatives who started Old Glory Bank. It's oldglorybank.com, oldglorybank.com. You go there, it takes less than 6 minutes to fill out the form online, and you can get an account. I have a checking account with them. I have a savings account with them. You can get one for your kids, a custodial account. You can get one for yourself. It's a great bank. You will enjoy using Old Glory Bank. They stay out of your way. They stay here. They make banking life easy for you, even depositing cash at 88,000 retail locations around the country. OldGloryBank.com. Member FDIC, Equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. It is my bank. It can be your bank too. OldGloryBank.com. Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, this hour of the program is brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. Wherever you are nationwide, if you're in charge of the business of a business and you want it to grow, you need access to heavy equipment loans, loans for buying a franchise or buying out your business partner, things like that. Reach out to them, firstlibertyga.com, firstlibertyga.com. I got to play for you this clip from Nicole Wallace, who absolutely melted down on MSNBC over J.D. Vance's performance.
Good enough rebuttal?
J.D. Vance said, well, Donald Trump strengthened and saved Obamacare. That's what he came back and said.
Right.
It's the audacity. I agree with you that we're in year 9 and no one knows how to cover the audacity. The audacity is that someone should have said, stop it, stop. Are you effing kidding me? And they should have dropped that F-bomb, right? I mean, they should have just, this is a debate. This may be the only chance people have to see the difference. And instead, I mean, I'll go back to my toothpicks. J.D. Vance just put one little toothpick on top of the other and said, and I'm for this and I'm for this. And I'm so sorry those women died. They died because of Donald Trump.
She couldn't. Poor thing, having a psychotic break live on national television because J.D. Vance did better than Tim Walz. And y'all, it was like North Korean news at MSNBC today. They want to assure their audience Tim Walz was the brilliant, greatest debate performer ever. It was absolutely wild to watch. Absolutely wild. Okay. So I got about 30 seconds. We got people who want to chime in on the debate. I have had enough to say about this that I didn't have time to take phone calls. So those of you on the phones, if you're patient with me, when we come back, I will take your calls in the next segment, get your debate comments off your chest before I move on to other stuff. Real quick, though, my buddy Morgan House up in Gainesville, he ran his first Ironman in Chattanooga. He survived. I got to go up there and buy him a beer. Congratulations to him on his Ironman. And my dear listener, Karen, happy birthday. She and I were just trading emails. When we come back, Israel needs to bomb Iran. They really, really need to bomb Iran and do it quickly. I want to explain why. And I also want to take your phone calls, 877-973-7425.